This is going to be CJ Stroud from his combine just a few days ago, and we're going to go in depth into just his very smooth release, very quick release, and very overall efficient utilization of his body. First thing that we see here, he's throwing the slant. You can see the initial action as the ball's coming back, and notice, because I see this a lot, especially with younger quarterbacks or just quarterbacks that don't have very efficient mechanics, he's not pushing the ball away. He's not getting the ball away from his body. He's here, and from that position, he goes a little bit away right there, little tiny bit, but for the most part, he's going straight back. And then from there, now he's immediately getting that nose of the football around. And instead of getting around the football with the wrist and making it so the nose of the football is facing to the side or starting to face forward, I see a lot of guys who have the ball facing back or up or in a wide variety of different directions. So we can already see in this position, he's starting to get the wrist around, which ends up being critical. Now, here is where we see a bit of a dip in his wrist. Now we see the nose of the football coming up. So this is where he has that really great external rotation. Notice he's not getting the ball really far back behind the head. And also notice how much rotation he's getting in those hips. So at this position, he's creating a ton of rotation, keeping that front shoulder closed. And that really allows him to be able to get a nice controlled motion. And also makes it so when he gets into this position and the ball being not far back behind his head, more right behind the shoulder, makes it so now the motion is going to be very straight as the ball comes out. So that helps him getting the ball out of his hand very efficiently. Let's take a look at from a just time perspective how long it takes. Starts at 7:2, right? I'm just looking at this timestamp back here, and he's got the ball out of the hand by 0.02, right? So 0.3 seconds. That seems to be, especially for these underneath throws, what most guys are getting to. There's a time where I was like, it's got to be closer to 0.04 and, making a bit of a point to be able to get to there. But now it's like, if it takes you longer than 0.35, it's taking you too long. Again, look at how fast he gets to that nose of the football here, and then he gets to this position, and then from there it's coming right through. And this is what I talk about with the wrist flick. The wrist flick starts here. This is why some of these guys are so unique and have so much power in their throw, is that the ball's facing all the way up. And then from here, he's going to go and flick that wrist and make it so that nose of the football face is forward. And then his hand and wrist are going to continue the follow through from there. Right? Another thing that I've been talking about here recently is that when we get to this position, we want to be able to see a bit of extension in the elbow. So he's getting himself into a good position with his arm, so he's coming down on the ball. Notice he's here. He's getting the nose of football back, gets the nose of football straight up. This is where he gets that great external rotation. This is like what we see with Mahomes, what we see with Josh Allen, a lot of these top guys, is they get a lot of external rotation there, and then they're coming through, release, flick. And notice how when he flicks, he gets a lot of downward action here, just like we talked about before, where it's almost like a jump shot. And then from there, he's getting rotation. And then there's three different planes, right? So first he's getting frontal plane. So he's got that thumb down, and this is what we're talking about with like that fishing pole. And he's coming down here. And then now he's got that jump shot finish. And then he's got the rotation like what we see when you're throwing a football. That's the only really way to be able to replicate it. Now we'll see how it all transfers over when it comes to throwing the deep ball, right? Being able to get in a good control position. What always stands out to me when the guys are throwing the deep ball is just how well they're able to stay back. And how do they stay back? It's because they keep this bend in their spine. They keep the shoulder over that back foot. So then when you come through and you land, we can shift our weight forward into that front leg. A lot of times what I see when guys make mistakes is that what they do is as they're getting here is they take just a step, and some guys will even go and close themselves off with their feet and make it so they're not in a good position there. But most of the time they take this step and immediately shift all their weight forward. So then as they're going through the throw, you can see their heel off the ground. We see all of their momentum all forward, where you really want to be in a position where you have most of your weight behind the throw is the main concept. So you can see here, he's releasing, and notice when he's releasing, his hips are still behind his heel. So the better we can do at being able to keep the hips behind the heel, the better you're going to be at being able to really maximize your throwing distance overall. Notice how his hips are leading here. Hips rotating, then the front shoulder, then the elbow, and then he releases. Again, very important to be able to fully understand in order to maximize your throwing performance. So as always, guys, if you like the information, click that thumbs up down below, subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, comments, or recommendations, you can leave those down below. Just trying to make this all very simple when it comes to quarterback mechanics. I want to try to make it so the message is as clear as possible. I think there's a lot of different opinions out there. There's a lot of people that are saying, you know, you got to throw like this, you got to throw like that. And, you know, there's just a lot of inconsistency in terms of the load, in terms of the weight shift. Should the toe be pointed at the target? Should the hip be pointed at the target? Where should the wrist position be? I think that there's nobody else that's talking about the wrist like how I talk about the wrist. I know that for sure. And a lot of what ends up happening within the wrist and how well you could utilize the wrist becomes a key determinant when it comes to how effective you are able to use the entire rest of your body. It's all about the sequence. So if you're not able to get a good wrist flick, if the ball's not coming out of your hand with that large amount of force and that great spiral and the great timing, then there's something going on with how well you're able to utilize the wrist, which then makes it so everything else is thrown off. So once people can start to get an understanding of what it should feel like when the ball's leaving their hand and how to be able to create the 3 planes of movement within their wrist, you start to see a lot of improvement very quickly. And that's a big part of what we do within our quarterback mechanics program. Whether you do it online, whether you do it in person, I think you're going to get a ton of value just because we're going to put a big focus on how you're throwing the football. There's a lot of great information out there, and there's a lot of great coaches that can teach you a lot about the timing behind it and just playing the quarterback position as a whole and how to be able to make the right reads and, you know, develop as a quarterback, which is totally different than being able to actually make improvements within the mechanics to get specific into the biomechanics. And that's what I think I do better than anybody, is really give you that in-depth analysis into where in the mechanics you're getting messed up. A lot of times, the further along you go, people aren't trying to look into getting mechanics, right? If you're going to go and offer somebody a full ride scholarship for a school that costs $100,000 a year, let's say, you don't want to go and have to invest a lot of time into doing the basics with them. You want to find somebody that already has those great mechanics. So what you want to be able to do is really invest into yourself and make it so you can get those mechanics, so then you become more valuable and more of a commodity for a coach to be able to actually recruit them onto your team. But if you have a lot of mechanical problems that you have going on, coaches aren't going to be interested, you know, unless you are 6'5" or super fast, super athletic, things like that. Anthony Richardson's a great example of that. I mean, he has really good mechanics, but he has a lot of the athleticism that coaches are now interested in, as well as good mechanics, right? It's not like he's going to have to go into some place and get a bunch of information on how to improve his mechanics. And that's how you should be as well. You should have great mechanics wherever it is that you go.